What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another modern video, and today we're going to be taking a look at a deck that has done very well here in the past weekend's modern challenges, where as you can see kind of on the side there was 5 copies in the top 8, or excuse me, 4 copies in the top 8 of the challenge on a Saturday, and then the Sunday challenge having actually won it again also. So today we're going to be taking a look at 4-color Omnath, a deck that was super popular back when Yorion was legal and kind of fell off after the banning. I mean, was still kind of like dredging around and everything, but really hadn't put up any meaningful results, outside, an occasional good one, here and there. So today we're going to take a look at Aspiring Spikes list and just kind of see what exactly has changed to make this deck so good. And it might be pretty obvious very soon. But before we do that, of course, before we get into it, I would appreciate it if you are not already subscribed to the channel, that you do subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you know when videos like this and others get posted, as well as following the links in the description down below if you want to check out the deck. The deck list link is there, my Twitch, and my Discord server as well. So, 4-color Omnath is, of course, based around Omnath, Locus of Creation. This monstrosity of a card that ruined Standard for a time, was like one of the most powerful decks to play in Modern, and just overall was just an extreme value engine slash game ender that really, I mean, like worked at like any time, honestly. So when it enters, it draws a card, and then it had landfall. So it essentially had 3 different triggers. If it resolved one time, you gain 4 life. If it's the second time it's resolved, you add 1 mana of every color except for black. And the third time, you deal 4 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker you don't control. The relevant thing here is the fact that gaining 4 life and adding mana is probably the most important because you're winning like in other ways with this deck. So in this case, the life gain is even more relevant because of this new card from the Lord of the Rings set, the One Ring, which is a 4 mana indestructible artifact. Enters the battlefield, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. You lose a life for each burden counter on the One Ring at the beginning of your upkeep, and then you tap it to put a burden counter on it, and then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. So with this deck, obviously in the past, like with these elemental decks, when you have solitudes and you're 2-for-1ing yourself and things like that, you are putting yourself down on cards to have a certain effect, and the One Ring is able to kind of negate that in the fact that like you can draw 2, 3, 4, 5 cards, and as long as you have this Omnath Locus of Creation going, you're not really losing life. Like with your fetch lands, you can play 1, gain 4, tap the ring to put a third counter on it, draw 3 cards, and then at the beginning of your upkeep you lose 3 life. Like you've net 1 life in that exchange. On top of, if you decide to wait till your opponent's turn to fetch again, you gain another 4 life, which means that you're up 5 life, and then you can tap the ring to draw 5 cards, and then you're essentially at the life total you were at 2 turns ago by the time you get to that next upkeep. And to keep that in mind too, you're also, it's like 9 cards that you've drawn. Like that's, or seven, 8, 9 cards you've drawn. Like that's insane. And Omnath like kind of helps facilitate that. On top of that, like if you don't do that, again, it's just the typical like play land, gain 4 life, fetch, go get something, add a bunch of mana, and then you have some finishers as well that you can kind of play at 5 mana. You have Elish Norn and Titania that you can play. Titania is kind of like a spike pick, but it's actually really cool. You get to return a land from your graveyard to the battlefield. I can get that third trigger on Omnath, if you want it. Getting back a fetch land that can also then get you 1 trigger on your opponent's turn to gain some life. And then whenever a land you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you create a 5/3. So each one of your fetch lands is essentially going to create a 5/3 on top of it. And, of course, again, with Titania, getting back a fetch land, you can essentially immediately make another 5/3. This deck plays a lot of fetch lands. In Floor Flooded Strand, 2 Misty Rainforests, you have 4 Windswept Heath, and then like this flood of like one of, lands and things like that that you can go get, 2 Misty Rainforests as well. So, and with Red and 6 able to get them back as well, Titania isn't just like a one shot, get something back, and then like we're gonna make a 5/3, get a Nomnat trigger, etc. You can just continually make a 5/3, like every turn cycle, and eventually just kind of like overwhelm your opponent in that way. You have Nissa Resurgent Animus, which was from the March of the Machines Aftermath, which essentially is like a Lotus Cobra, where whenever land enters, you add a mana vein color. But then the second time this ability resolves, you reveal cards until you reveal an elf or an elemental. And then you put that card in your hand, put the rest on the bottom in random order. Of course, that means that you could hit the other Nissa Resurgent Animist, but you could flip into Omnath, you could flip into a Solitude, and things like that. Nothing really like in the sideboard. There's probably some changes that you can make. You could technically hit an Endurance off this Nissa as well, which is pretty sweet. Delighted Halfling is another Lord of the Rings card that was printed in that set that essentially makes sure legendary spells uncounterable and fixes your mana as well. So you're able to play like a halfling on one and then play a turn two Teferi Time Raveler and just kind of like accrue value that way, and the fact that your opponent can't really interact with you, and that sets up like a turn three Omnath as well, where your opponent really can't do anything. This deck definitely does find a way to kind of like put you in a chokehold because it does have a lot of these like efficient spells. You see like for Reprieve here, another card that is from the Lord of the Rings set that's essentially a Remand, but a little bit better than Remand because it doesn't have the contingency of having to counter it to put it back in the opponent's hand. And it also gets to draw a card as well. I believe during like Spike's stream, he said that this was kind of like a flex card that you could play. Spell Pierce is just early, cheap interaction. You have Leyline Bindings because we are essentially a 4 or 5 color deck. Leyline Binding is going to cost 1 mana to 2 mana pretty reliably, on the early turns of the game. You have 1 Beseiju in the main deck and 2 in the sideboard. You're never going to leave home without them. Beseiju, of course, just kind of gives you that utility of getting to blow up like problematic lands, artifacts, enchantments, and so on that could kind of stop you from like winning the game with this deck. You have like Grafdigger's Cages for some of the graveyard decks. You have Pithing Needles for, just annoying people. Really kind of like Yawgmoth. You could name like opposing rings and stuff, which turns off yours, which kind of sucks. But, I'm sure if you can get your value out of ring and then needle any future rings from them, that's pretty good. The Force Spell Pierce in the sideboard, more endurances for graveyard hate. You have Force of Negation and Force of Vigor. Force of Vigor, like very, very good in like the hammer matchups, and then Force of Negation for when you need to interact with your opponents, like Living Ends or Rhinos and things like that on their turn. And that is the 4-color Omnath deck, specifically Aspiring Spike's version of the 4-color Omnath deck. I believe a lot of these other decks have different like variations and different takes and like what cards that they play in the deck. I just found Spike's to be very entertaining, and I actually got to watch him play the deck, and it looked really good, honestly. Like this deck definitely seems like it's pretty cracked, and would be a deck that if you could somehow afford the $1,600 price tag, and of course the, you know, like $300-400 in Lord of the Rings cards that you would need to actually play this deck, I would go ahead and give it a shot. I mean, it looks like it's a lot of fun, even if like just to mess around with it. And I actually would kind of look forward to getting some games in with it as well if I'm able to actually get it off Minitrays, which I probably won't be able to, but we'll see. We'll make something work. Of course, that's going to do it for this video. If y'all enjoyed, please consider leaving a like on the video, and of course subscribing to the channel and ringing the notification bell if you have not already done so, and then following the links in the description as well. If you want to check out the deck list, you want to go follow me on Twitch, things like that, go ahead and do so if you so choose. That's going to do it for me. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.